Have you ever thought about it? A man who has never been called by his real name in his life, or even his face, which has never been seen by anyone. His cell had no windows. The only light that came. His meals were propelled by guards with iron spoons. He never spoke to outsiders, and his presence was only referred to in the most secret of royal documents by proxy with a single number: 6,438,901. This is not fiction. This is a real case that took place in 17th century France. A prisoner, clad in an iron mask, was held in secret for more than 30 long years, and until his death, his face remained. Over the past 300 years, countless historians, writers, and political conspiracy theorists have tried to unravel his true identity. Was he the twin brother, hidden by Louis XIV? A general with knowledge? Voltaire wrote about him, Hugo wrote about him, and even Jin Yong borrowed his image. But to this day, no one dares to say, who is the man in the iron mask? Let's go back to where it all began. 1698, Paris, France. A black carriage travels by night along the Marne, unmarked, unescorted, accompanied only by Monsieur Sandois, Marchand, the Royal High Commissioner. The carriage carried a prisoner, dressed in a robe of fine fabric, but his face was covered with a metal mask wrapped in velvet. He didn't protest. He didn't shout. He didn't even have handcuffs on. He sat up straight, like an aristocrat, and like a man waiting to be executed at any moment. The prison warden's private notes say this: this person is not allowed to speak, and any communication will result in the execution of the guards. This person's identity is to be kept secret until after his death, and his body is to be buried done. Who could have given such a harsh order? In that year, Louis XIV was in his prime, and was known as the Sun King. He had just finished his war with Spain, and his kingship was in the ascendant. But in this year, he quietly moved an unknown prisoner into the deepest cell, placed him under the guard. Even 3 years later, he decreed, the man in the iron mask must be transferred from Fort Pinero to the Bastille, not to be seen in public along the way, but to be escorted by 3 men and covered. Is a common criminal worth all this trouble? In the L series, Records of the French National Archives, we found a criminal file that had long been classified as secondary evidence. One of them, a handwritten note, reads in a flowery script with courtly handwriting, "If the truth is known, the throne will be shattered." This is the only document left suggesting that the true identity of the man in the iron mask could threaten the stability of the royal family. And the note, at one point tucked away in the pages of an unrelated local law book, was only inadvertently discovered in 1989 by a researcher restoring an old text. A man whose name has been erased, a man whose face must be hidden, a man who cannot tell the truth even in death. Who is it? We will then go step by step back to the origin of history, through wars, conspiracies, document forgeries, and the entanglement of royal bloodlines, to trace the secrets buried by the whole of France. On September 5, 1661, at the age of 23, Louis XIV ascended the throne as King of France, and has since become one of the most powerful and ambitious monarchs in Europe. Known as the Sun King, he was personally in charge of everything, from internal affairs and diplomacy to dress and dance. But behind the glitter of the throne, a rumor that has been deliberately down, beneath the sun, there is another shadow. Within the high walls of Paris, it had been rumored that Queen Anna, after giving birth to Louis XIV, had secretly given birth to another child. In 1638, long before the birth of Louis XIV, Queen Anna's marriage to Louis XIII was in name only, and the king himself was deeply involved in rumors of a relationship with a male lover. In order to carry on the family line, the royal family arranged strict fertility rites. It was even said that those who kept records had to be present for the entire ceremony. But strangely, the Royal Nativity Archive has missing pages for that year, and the copy in the National Library has some of the handwriting treated with silver nitrate, which is clearly a deliberate. The painting, housed in an undisclosed gallery of the Louvre, was not renumbered and archived until 2003. Originally labeled Allegory of the Myth of the Crown, an infrared scan revealed that the Origle, Gemini occultus, hidden twins. According to the Abbey's history, an unregistered baby was secretly brought to the Abbey of St. Philip in Le Havre in the early 1640s. He was given an identity number, no name, and never set foot outside the monastery until he was 10 years old, when he was transferred to the Royal Guard School for unknown reasons. The letter from, "He's not like the other students. He was trained to be a king, but was told he would never have to call himself a king. Who is this teenager? Why was he taught such contradictions?" And, according to a manuscript of a jailer's deposition, unsealed during the French Revolution, in 1790, a bizarre detail is mentioned. The masked prisoner was extremely well-bred and fluent in Latin and ancient Greek. For a time we thought he was a prince, for he never conversed with vulgar guards, nor did he care to engage in prison. The man in the iron mask was not just a prisoner, but a man who was educated as a prince, but never got to be one. Can you imagine a man whose name was taken away, whose face was erased, and who was Conotherings Tay? What if he's the real first prince? In the next chapter, we'll track down a centuries-old royal medical report and a secret surgical procedure that could hardly have existed at the time, whose birth, in the French royal tradition of record-keeping, the birth of every prince or princess must be recorded jointly by the royal clerk, the midwife royal physician, and the archbishop, and confirmed by this system has been in place for centuries, and any omission could lead to a dispute over the succession to the throne. However, on September 5, 1638, the day of Louis XIV's birth, the second page of the instrument of the birth of the three co-signatories, as it should have been, is missing from the National Archives. Analyzed by a French historical handwriting expert, the handwriting in the second half of the document is different from the usual typeface used by Jean Desmarais, the court recorder, and is suspected. This anomaly is considered to be one of the most suspicious cases of tampering with official documents in French history. According to the Diary of the Imperial Doctor of Versailles, 1641 edition, the delivery of Queen Anna that year was far more complicated than the smoothness of the public account. The original article, after the Queen had given birth to a son, there remained signs of a suspected second child. The attendants all retired, leaving only the priest and the chief physician, and at one point, there was Viol. This description has been recognized by later generations as ecclesiastical hyperbole, but in 2006, a newly discovered private letter in the ancient archives of Angers revolutionized this view. The author of the letter, Bernard Gravel, a deputy in the royal kitchen, wrote, "2 baby milk meals were prepared that night, one soft and one thin, and I was only ordered to bring one to the inner room. The remaining one was quickly dumped. I did not see the child out of tea." The paper has been tested by the French Center for the Restoration of Historical Documents, and it is suspected that the original text has been smeared with a protein cleaning solution and rewritten W. One of the pages is labeled with the phrase, "Anonymous Infantum," unnamed infant. This is a rare mark, usually used for bloodline descendants who survive for a short time, but are not recognized by the 2C, and this mark appears on the same page where Louis XIV was born. What does this mean? A baby who never had a name appears above the beginning of the throne. Are we approaching the truth? A doctored birth record, a covered-up delivery ceremony, an unnameable royal baby, and decades later, there happens to be a man of unspecified identity and upbringing who is forever imprisoned to death in a mask. Is it just a coincidence? In the fourth installment, we enter the laboratory of a contemporary geneticist, where a gene-matching study is revealing the true family identity of the man in the iron mask. In 2016, a study, otherwise unknown to the outside world, was quietly launched in a medical archive laboratory in Paris, France. Leading the study was French geneticist Professor Jean-Claude Delaville, a forensic expert who worked on a project to reconstruct the remains of French royal descendants. He received a special request from the Ministry of Culture to examine a fragment of the skull of an unnamed prisoner in an attempt to match his family lineage. The fragment, No. BST 1703 F. Source, recorded as Prisoner Dead, Unmarked, Bastille, 1703. The only unrecorded body in the register of the dead in prisons. Prof. Delaville compared this chromosome sequence with a blood sample from Louis XVI, the identified great-grandson of Louis XIV. He thought that this was just an exclusionary verification, but the preliminary data shows that the sample has a paternal genetic sequence to the Bourbon royal family, a whopping 94.8% match. Summary of preliminary results for Project DFR 1735, July 2016 file. This means the man in the iron mask, most likely, has a direct paternal blood link to King Louis XIV, the King of France. That summer, Delavalle's team began to deeply trace the genetic flow of the Bourbon royal line through the generations. They tried to rule out possible distant relatives, but the results of finer comp. The individual is genetically distant from the Sun King by no more than one generation. In other words, either a son or a brother. And according to surviving historical records of the French royal fam, this is not a study we can just release to the public. At one point, we even considered immortalizing its results, because it shook not just one person's name, but the logic of kingship in a coup. This code appears in the prison record book, which is held only by the king and the Privy Council. It is on the same page as the register of the man in the Iron Mask's real name, as if to suggest that Ille frater regius, said Nullus. He was the king's brother, but not anyone else. These words, taken from the deathbed notes of a courtier in 1704, are one of the most cryptic and timid confessions of the entire Bourbon era. A nameless corpse, a royal genetic code, a truth that cannot be voiced. If this is not a coincidence, it is the deepest cover-up in history. In the fifth part, we will follow the reasons why Louis XIV tried to conceal the existence of his brother and the alternative to the throne that this man with the iron face might have held. In the history of the French court, Versailles is not only a symbol of domination, but also a textbook on control and exclusion. And the most dangerous character in this play is not the enemy, not the traitor, but the one who may be legitimate, but is not recognized. Louis XIV succeeded to the throne at the age of 5 and was placed under the regency of his mother, Anna. This was also the most fragile period of the Bourbon dynasty. The country's finances were Kamal. Historian Pierre Botte notes in his book, The Alchemy of the Sun King, if, at this juncture, the news of another brother born on the same day were to break, it would not only trigger a palace coup, but could lead to the whole of France being plunged into a civil war. So, they chose the cleanest and most extreme way, not to kill him, but to make him never exist. This is not an isolated case. In Europe, from the Middle Ages to the Age of Enlightenment, masked imprisonment was a typical form of political treatment that allowed for the isolation of real ID, and the man in the iron mask is imprisoned not just by confinement, but by ritualized erasure. He has no name, no visitors, no records. The only thing that remains is a single and chilling corda. The total price is 275 livres, the equivalent of an entire year's earnings for a mid-level knight. Is this a prisoner's mask, or the golden yoke of a shadow prince forced to abdicate? The letter is dedicated to the regent, Anna Austria, and is addressed to Jules Mazarin, the substantive ruler of France, to whom eclipse, like concealment and daylight, like vigilance are given, so that the Sun King may become unique. This letter seems to give the only plausible explanation. The man in the iron mask did. History repeats itself in similar ways. In the later years of his life, Louis XIV realized that the stability of his power was based on the illusion of a sole legitimate succession. Once the identity of the man in the iron mask is revealed, not only he, but also his future grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be questioned about his lineage and legitimacy. So, even if he is imprisoned for 30 years, even if he is never allowed to speak, even if he is not allowed to have a funeral after his death, let this man evaporate from history. Not every prince makes it to the throne, but the prince who is forgotten by the throne often carries the deepest secrets of kingship. Can we conclude that? Not yet, because the man in the iron mask is not only a secret history of the court, he is also a period of European civilization on the truth of power, repression, bloodline. In the next chapter, we'll unveil how this secret reverberates outside of France, and why it's raising concerns again in the 21st century. The man in the iron mask did not disappear from history the moment he died. Instead, he became an even more powerful being, an unnameable ghost, an enigma that cannot be ignored. He stayed in the archives, in the legends, in the novels, in the theater, even written into the space of memory outside the legal system. He was not a criminal, not a traitor, but some kind of divine. Voltaire. On the untold history of the French court, Voltaire was the first intellectual to openly state that the iron mask is royal. This was not a conspiracy theorist's fantasy, but the most sober questioning of the Age of Enlightenment. Hugo went further. He portrayed the man in the iron mask as a soul played by fate, an heir to justice betrayed by his brother, watching from a dark cell as the dynasty continued to run. To this day, this case has never been reinvestigated by any French government. With the opening of the digitized archives in the 21st century, on YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, and other social media platforms, he has become one of the most discussed historical mysteries, with more than 100 million views of related content. But the question remains. We have the DNA, we have the handwriting comparisons, we have the transcribed secret paperwork, but we, still, don't have the face. If he lived today, what would he do? Would he be a scholar, a commander, or even a president? Would he walk into a TV station and tell his story? Or will, all his life? He belonged to no history, but the silence that was closed under the iron skin. One of the teenage tourists asked in a whisper, "If he really is the king's brother, doesn't he have the right to sit on the throne?" In the depths of history, not every silence is obedience. Do you believe that a person can be erased from history? Do you believe that dynasties erase the existence of a bloodline in order to continue? Do you believe that an iron mask, which can trap a face, can trap a truth? If you were him, how would you face your fate? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to the channel to explore more secrets that time forgot.